You're standing in a grocery store in Ohio. You've got 12 items in your cart, nothing fancy. Milk, eggs, chicken, bread, some vegetables, cereal. The basics. You get to the register and it's $93. You pause, you recount the items, you check the receipt. Everything's correct. You leave the store with this quiet, creeping feeling that something fundamental has changed, and you can't quite name when it happened. That feeling? It's not paranoia. It's pattern recognition. The cost of living in America isn't rising, it already rose. Here's the uncomfortable part. If you ask most Americans whether life is more expensive now than it was 5 years ago, they'll say yes immediately. If you ask economists whether inflation is under control, many will also say yes. Both groups are telling the truth. And that's exactly the problem. Because what we're experiencing isn't just about prices going up. It's about the entire structure of American life becoming unaffordable at the exact same time that the official numbers say everything's fine. Let me show you what I mean. In 1985, the median home price in the United States was roughly $75,000. The median household income was about $23,000. That means the average home cost about 3.3 times the average yearly income. Tight, but manageable. You saved for a few years, you got a mortgage, you made it work. Fast forward to today. The median home price is around $430,000. Median household income is about $75,000. That's a ratio of 5.7 to 1. The gap didn't just widen, it exploded. But here's where it gets strange. If you pull up the official inflation data, housing costs are included in the Consumer Price Index. They're measured, they're tracked. And according to that index, inflation over the past few years has been real but not catastrophic. It peaked, it cooled, it stabilized. So why does it feel like the floor fell out? Because the CPI measures something called shelter cost, which includes rent, and something called owner's equivalent rent. That's an estimate of what homeowners would pay if they were renting their own house. It's a smooth number, a lagging number. It doesn't capture the violent swings in actual home prices or the fact that entire generations are now priced out of ownership entirely. You see the trick? The index measures the cost of living, but it doesn't measure the cost of entry, and that distinction is everything. Let's talk about rent, since that's where most people actually feel the squeeze. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in America is now over $1,400 a month. In cities, it's far worse. Boston, San Francisco, New York, we're talking $2,500 to $3,500 for a basic apartment. Not luxury, basic. The rule of thumb used to be that you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income on housing. It was a guideline from the 1960s, designed to keep people financially stable. Reasonable, right? Today, more than half of renters in the United States spend over 30% of their income on rent. Nearly a quarter spend over 50%. That's not a budgeting failure. That's a structural collapse. And it's not just housing. It's everything, all at once. Childcare costs have increased by over 200% in the last 30 years, even after adjusting for inflation. The average cost of daycare in the US is now around $12,000 per year per child. In some states, it's more expensive than in-state college tuition. You read that right. It costs more to keep a toddler safe for 8 hours a day than it does to send an 18-year-old to a state university. Health insurance premiums have tripled since the year 2000. The average family plan now costs over $23,000 a year, most of that covered by employers. But the employee contribution alone is over $6,000. And that's before you pay the deductible, which has also doubled. Cars? The average price of a new car in America just crossed $48,000. Used cars, which used to be the fallback, are now averaging around $27,000. And because inventory got squeezed during the pandemic and never fully recovered, people are paying near-new prices for vehicles with 60,000 miles already on them. Even food, the thing we started with, has become a calculation. Ground beef is up 40% since 2020. Eggs hit $6 a dozen in some parts of the country during the bird flu outbreak and never really came all the way back down. A box of cereal that used to be $3 is now $5. You start adding it up and the picture gets ugly fast. Let's do the math on a hypothetical but extremely average American adult. Let's say they make $55,000 a year. After federal and state taxes, they're taking home around $42,000. Divide that by 12, and they've got $3,500 a month. Rent in a mid-sized city? $1,500. Groceries for one person eating modestly? $400. Car payment on that used vehicle? $400. Car insurance because it's legally required? $150. Gas? $120. Health insurance employee contribution? $200. Internet and phone? $100. Utilities? $120. Student loan payment if they went to college? $250. We're at $3,440. They've got $60 left for literally everything else. Clothes, haircuts, soap, emergency savings, retirement, entertainment, existing. And we haven't even mentioned credit card debt, which Americans now hold over $1 trillion of, or medical debt, or the fact that 40% of Americans say they couldn't cover a $500 emergency without borrowing. So what happened? How did we get here? The answer isn't one thing, it's a cascade. Wages stagnated for decades while productivity kept climbing. That means workers produced more value but didn't see it reflected in their paychecks. The gap went to shareholders and executives. Then housing became an investment asset instead of just a place to live, so Wall Street and foreign capital started buying up properties, turning homes into financial instruments. That pushed prices up artificially. At the same time, zoning laws in most American cities made it nearly impossible to build new housing, especially dense, affordable housing. Supply stayed flat while demand kept growing. Econ 101. Prices went up. Healthcare costs spiraled because the U.S. system is designed to maximize revenue for hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, and insurers, not to deliver efficient care. There's no price transparency, no real competition, and no mechanism to control runaway costs. So, they ran away. Education costs exploded because states cut funding to public universities, forcing schools to raise tuition and students to take on debt. That debt became a permanent anchor on young adults, delaying homeownership, delaying family formation, delaying everything. And childcare? There's no federal system. It's privatized, lightly regulated, and staffed by workers who are paid so little they often qualify for public assistance themselves. High costs, low wages. The worst of both worlds. Then the pandemic hit and broke the supply chain. Stimulus money flooded the economy. Demand spiked. Prices spiked. Some of that was classic inflation. But some of it was just corporations realizing they could raise prices and blame inflation, and most people wouldn't push back because the narrative was everywhere. And here's the kicker. A lot of those prices never came back down. Shrinkflation became the norm. Your bag of chips is now 20% smaller but costs the same. Your detergent is more watered down. Your subscription services all raised their rates by $2 or $3 and hoped you wouldn't notice. So yes, inflation cooled, the rate of increase slowed, but the prices stayed high, and that's what people feel. Now let's zoom out. This isn't just about budgets, it's about what kind of society we're building. Because when the cost of entry to a stable life, homeownership, kids, healthcare, education becomes unaffordable for the average person, you don't just get financial stress. You get a generation that stops planning for the future. Birth rates in the US have been falling for years. Millennials and Gen Z are having fewer kids, and when you ask them why, the number one answer is financial. They can't afford it. And they're right. Homeownership rates for people under 35 have cratered. The dream of building equity, the cornerstone of middle-class wealth in America, is now functionally out of reach unless you have family money or a six-figure income. Retirement? The 401k system was never designed to replace pensions, but it did anyway, and now millions of Americans are heading into old age with almost nothing saved. The median retirement account balance for people aged 55 to 64 is around $15,000. That's not a typo. $15,000. You can't retire on that. You can barely survive a year. And all of this is happening while the stock market hits record highs, while billionaires add hundreds of billions to their net worth, while GDP grows and unemployment stays low. The macro numbers look fine. Great, even. But the lived experience for tens of millions of people is chronic, grinding financial stress. It's deciding between fixing the car and going to the doctor. It's skipping meals to make rent. It's watching your parents work into their 70s because Social Security isn't enough. There's a term for this. It's called a vibecession. The economy looks good on paper, but it feels terrible in practice. And the disconnect is maddening because it makes people feel crazy. The data says one thing. Their bank account says another. Here's what makes it worse. There's no villain you can point to. No single policy you can reverse. It's systemic. It's structural. It's the result of 50 years of decisions made by both political parties, by corporations, by local governments, by individuals, all optimizing for short-term gain and kicking the consequences down the road. And now the road has run out. Some people will say the solution is to build more housing. And yes, we should. But that takes years, and it requires zoning reform that politically powerful homeowners will fight tooth and nail because it might lower their property values. Some will say we need higher wages. Correct. But wage growth has to outpace cost growth. And right now, it's not even close. A $15 minimum wage sounds good until rent is $2,000. Others will point to universal health care, subsidized childcare, tuition-free college. All of those would help. But they require political will and massive public investment, and both are in short supply. So where does that leave us? It leaves us in a place where the cost of living in America has become a slow-motion crisis that everyone can see but no one seems able to fix. Where the gap between what life costs and what people earn keeps widening. Where the middle class is being hollowed out in real time and the safety net underneath is full of holes. And the strangest part? We're still pretending the old advice works. Save 10% of your income. Buy a home. Invest in your 401k. Start a family. But how do you save when there's nothing left to save? How do you buy a home when you're competing against hedge funds paying cash? How do you invest when you're living paycheck to paycheck? How do you start a family when daycare costs more than rent? The math doesn't work anymore. But we keep running the same equation, expecting a different answer. So here's the question we're left with. Is this just a rough patch, a temporary misalignment that will correct itself as markets adjust and policy catches up? Or is this the new normal? A permanently expensive America where stability is reserved for the top 20%, precarity is the default, and the cost of entry to a decent life just keeps climbing, forever out of reach? I don't know the answer, neither does anyone else. But I know what it feels like to stand in that grocery store holding a receipt for 12 items that cost $93 and realize that something broke. And it's not getting fixed anytime soon. If this resonated with you, subscribe. We're digging into the economic realities most people feel but few people explain. And if you found value in this breakdown, hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find content like this. Share it with someone who needs to see it. Thanks for watching.